Hello and welcome. If you're new here, my name is Manur and I'm a second year PhD student at Oxford University. Today, I wanted to talk about the structure of a PhD degree at Oxford. So, firstly, we do not call it a PhD at Oxford, we call it a DPhil. It is just a difference in terms, but it's essentially the same degree. It is a PhD. And moving on to the length of the PhD. So, an Oxford PhD degree or a DPhil degree is about 3 to 4 years, depending on your course and your funding options. So, for many courses, you can do a PhD in 3 years. For some, it might be 4 years. And a lot of it just depends on the type of project you have and the type of funding. So, if you have a funding from an agency that says they'll only fund you for 3 years, then you might have to make sure that your PhD completes in 3 years or look for additional funding for the fourth year if your project overruns. But essentially, it is quite attached to how long you have the funding for. For example, in my case, the funding is flexible because it comes from Oxford itself. So it says 3 years or up to the time of the degree. So that means I have a kind of window to extend it to 4 years if I need more time. And I think I will be needing more time given that I lost a lot of lab time due to the lockdowns in 2020. So you see, it just works as per your project and as per your funding options. So funding is essential for a PhD degree, especially if it is going to be a lab-based degree. I think it will slightly differ with a PhD in, for example, literature, Oriental studies, or history, where you do not need to be in the lab, it's just books. That again cost a lot, and going to conferences, interacting with people. There might be a lot of other things which I do not know of, and I apologize if someone wants details for that. That is just not my area. But if you're doing a PhD in biology, in engineering sciences, or any other thing that requires lab work or chemicals or bench fee, then it is highly dependent on the funding. So you might have to go for a 4 year degree if you have more funding or complete it in 3 years. So essentially, the length of your PhD degree is tied to your funding. Additionally, the structure of a PhD is made such that you have to complete certain things at a certain time. The thing is that you have to achieve certain milestones, and these are sort of exams that you have to pass at a certain time to be in line with finishing your PhD within time. So, an Oxford PhD degree does not include any kind of coursework. You directly go into your research or into your labs and you work there. There is no coursework at all. You might be required to undergo a few trainings or a few short courses, but those are not essentially courseworks, those are just certifications. For example, I needed to get trained in animal work because I work in a biology based lab and I might need to work with mice or other model animals in my project. I do not need that yet, but if you do need, then you need to sit through some tests. So I had to undertake a course in animal work and had to pass a test for that. So you see, it's just certain courses that might suit your project and not complete coursework that you have to do, which was one of the reasons I chose to study in the UK, because I thought going through coursework and giving exams during a PhD is just not something I'm interested in. So if you're looking for places where there's no coursework, you might want to try UK or other countries in Europe where there's no coursework in PhD. Coming back to the milestones in a PhD degree, since there are no exams or no essential coursework, what are these milestones? So the structure of an Oxford PhD is made rigid in a way that you have to reach certain milestones and pass them to remain in track with your degree timeline. And these milestones are just there to keep a check on you and make sure that you're doing alright and you're not struggling in your degree. The first milestone is transfer of status, which you have to pass at the end of your first year or by the end of your first year. And the second milestone, major milestone, is confirmation. That is when it is confirmed that you have to go and write your thesis and submit for a PhD degree. And this can happen either towards the end of your second year or third year, depending if you're going for a 3 year degree or a 4 year degree. So before you submit it, your confirmation has to be at least a year before you submit your thesis. So, explaining these milestones in detail. When you enter an Oxford PhD degree, when you begin, your first year is as a probationary research student. We call it as the PRS status. So, for the first year, you're not a PhD candidate, you are a PRS. That means you're on probation for the entire first year. And at the end of the first year, or towards the end of it, after 3 or 4 terms, because we have the term system, 3 terms per year at Oxford, so towards the end of the fourth term you should have passed your transfer of status exam. That means your first year is now completed. You are entering your second year, so you need to pass your transfer of status exam. And this exam is essentially just telling your examiners what you have done so far, what project you're working on, and what is your future goal with that project. So this gives the examiners a window into looking at whether you are likely to complete your PhD in time, whether you have the right kind of support, and whether you have enough knowledge about your project to be doing a PhD. So you essentially have to submit a 5,000 words report, and this can differ with departments. For medical sciences it is mostly 5,000. For psychology I think it is 7,000, and it can differ for different departments. But you submit a short report about your project, including the background, the theory, your hypothesis, and some results that you have achieved so far. Now, it is understood that during your first year, you might not have achieved significant results, but still, whatever you have observed so far, whatever you have done, and importantly, the Gantt chart into the next 2 or 3 years about what will you be doing next is important. So you have to give them a complete direction of what you have done so far and what you want to do next. So you submit this report, and then you have to sit through a viva, which is like you have to do a presentation of everything that you included in your report. And there are two examiners who are selected by you and your supervisor by mutual understanding, and your supervisor is not part of that exam. You have to undertake that exam with two examiners. One would be from your department and an external examiner. And what they do is they assess your report, they see your presentation, they cross question you on that, and then they give back a report to your department whether they think you are doing fine, whether you have ample supervision or you need more support, and whether you have the right kind of direction in your project and they feel you're likely to complete your project in time. Now, 99% of the people pass their transfer of exam in the first instance. There might be certain corrections required. Sometimes the examiners might feel that you need to give them more information, and they will ask you to do some corrections in your report, and then you do those corrections and submit within another month. Apart from being asked for corrections, the second type of issue could be that they ask you to sit through the exam another time, and then they give you a month or two to prepare again and do the exam again. And if you fail the second time as well, then they ask you to do an MSc and leave. You cannot proceed on to doing a PhD. I don't know of anyone to whom this has happened, and I've heard that this rarely ever happens, but there's a chance it could happen. So you have to pass your transfer of status exam by the end of your first year so as to progress to your next year, so as to become a PhD candidate. Because remember, for the first year you were on probation. So luckily I passed my transfer of status exam in the first time, in my first attempt, which was good. Even though there was a pandemic going on and I didn't have a lot of results, what I learned through this was that they're only looking for what ideas you have and whether you're capable of seeing those ideas through. Even with restrictions, if you have some results, if you fail, because with experiments you can fail a lot of times, but if you have a sense of direction, if you have other objectives that you can prove through certain experiments, then you are likely to complete your PhD. Even if you get negative results, they are still results. So this exam is just to make sure that you are on the right path, that you have a sense of direction about where your degree is going. Then for the second year, you're essentially gathering more data, working on your project, and there are no other exams. If you are going to finish your PhD in 3 years, then by the end of second year, or if you're finishing in 4 years, then by the end of third year, you have to sit for a confirmation exam. It is again with two examiners. Those could be the same as your examiners during the transfer, or you can select different examiners. It's totally up to you and your supervisor. And again, your supervisor is not part of the confirmation exam. It is you with two different examiners. And that is again a viva, just to see whether everything is on track, whether you can start writing your thesis and think about submitting for getting a PhD degree. So confirmation is kind of the final stamp that you have done everything, that you're on the right track to complete the final few bits of experiments that you might be needing for your PhD degree, and then you start writing your thesis and submit. So essentially that is how a PhD degree at Oxford works. And after you are confirmed to do a thesis and write your thesis and submit it, you then have to sit through a final viva about your entire PhD degree. And that viva can run for about 3 or 4 hours depending on your examiners, because it is your complete thesis, your work of 3 or 4 years. So that is the final straw. You have to set a final viva to show what you have done throughout your PhD degree. And after that viva, you get a reply about whether you pass or you need some changes. So there are two kind of changes that might be asked. Minor changes, meaning they just need some corrections in the thesis. Those could be technical errors, errors in grammar, or something to do with your thesis. The second kind of errors are major errors, where you might have to repeat certain experiments, go to the lab again, and then justify some of your data. So you either pass without any errors, which is very rare. You get some minor errors, major errors, and in the worst case scenario, you might have to spend another year in the lab to justify a lot of stuff. But since you already went through a transfer of status and a confirmation exam, it is highly unlikely that you would be asked to do extreme amount of work again, because those checks are in place just to make sure that you're doing well. And hopefully, if you are lucky, you will get away with minor or major changes, and that will be all, and you get your PhD degree. So that is essentially how the degree works. And I think that is all from my side for today. If you have any further questions, please comment down below and I would be happy to answer. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't already subscribed, please consider doing so. I will see you in the next video. Bye.